Hi, families. It's Mrs. Kim, or Kim, because this is for the parents. You don't have to call me anything but Kim. You can call me Mean Miss Kim if you like, because that's what a lot of my uh, children who have behaviors think that I am, is Mean Miss Kim. I'm coming to you today from my bedroom because when you're quarantined, there's not a lot of places to get privacy. So I couldn't be in my dining room or my living room like I normally am. So I came up here and closed the doors. What I want to talk to you today is about emotions. Not our kids' emotions, but our emotions. And why they matter. They do matter. I know I'm always saying about how the toddler's emotions matter, but ours matter too. You're in it with them. And usually the behaviors are directed at you. And so we do have emotions about our kids, that sometimes we might guilt ourselves about after, or we may be ashamed or embarrassed that we had those emotions, when in reality, um, we're people too. I always say that the little ones, oh, they're just little human beings. Well, we're just big human beings. And just because we have more control over our emotions doesn't mean that, we shouldn't deal with them. I'm going to tell you some stories about my experiences, about one of my best friend's experiences with emotions. Uh, okay, I'll first start by telling you that. Well, a lot of you know this about me. I'm not only a therapist, I am the parent of two children who have had services. My daughter Maddie was born just 6 weeks early, but boy, did that make a huge difference. I did not know what I was in for. I'd been taking care of babies since I was 10. On the street, the parents used to come to my house if their baby was crying and give me the baby while they visited with my mom and dad. And I would walk the baby around up and down the street. And I don't know why, but I just had this power, it felt like, to calm little ones. So I thought that I was completely prepared since, I was 27 when I had Maddie, and I've been doing that since I was 10. I was also a professional babysitter, and I was a nanny, and I was a teacher and a therapist before I ever had kids. So I was surrounded by kids all the time. Um, and I still wasn't prepared. I thought, oh my God, I totally thought I was. Uh, but looking back, it's so much easier for me because I got to say, here's your baby, and hand the baby back or the toddler back. And this time there was no handing this baby back. This was my baby. So it all started when she was born 6 weeks early. Um, obviously you're very emotional after you've just had a baby. And I took her home because I'm like, well, I work with preemies and early intervention, and I've been doing this my whole life. And then other family members were kind of putting guilt on me and saying, well, you should take her home. You shouldn't let her stay here. So I took her home after, the 3 days that you normally get. And in hindsight, it was a huge mistake because she didn't have that suck, swallow, breathe pattern down for feeding. So all we ever did was feed her. She had to be fed every 2 hours because she was a preemie. And it would take her, no lie, it would take her a full hour to drink a bottle that was was like that. Like there was like that much liquid in it. It was one of those ones that you first get at the hospital because she drank so little because she was little. They wanted us to keep track of every ounce down to the 0.02 or whatever. So it was only a bottle about this big, and you screwed on the top, and it would take her an hour, and you would have to tap the bottle. We had this special tap we did on the end of it so she'd kind of perk up and drink some more, because obviously we were worried about her temperature and her gaining weight. And she wasn't gaining a lot, so that's all it became. It was just feeding, 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 with about an hour in between. So I got like no sleep. And Mark would help me in the nights, and because he went to work during the day, and he got no sleep. And we were pretty like, from not having sleep, which, that brings a lot of emotions. Um, I also had postpartum depression. Um, it was really hard. I had the kind that, luckily, it didn't prevent me from bonding with my daughter. I was all up for that. I was up for the snuggles. I was up for everything. But the depression was, I would have these terrible images of, like, vivid, of doing something to her, and it scared me a lot. And so I was honest, and I went to the doctor, and I talked to the doctor about it, and we came up with a plan, because my emotions were just so out of control. And then now add on top of that, I was scared because, oh my God, what if I followed through with one of these terrible visions I'd been having? And I did a lot of beating myself up about it. I'm like, this is all I've ever wanted. All I ever wanted in my life, this is true. I tell you all how old-fashioned I am. All I ever wanted was to be a wife and a mom, and I'm so blessed that I am. That was my dream, and my dream came true. Um, and so I beat myself up horribly because I kept saying to myself, this is your dream, and you can't even get through it. Like, what is wrong with you? So I really pushed those emotions down because I didn't know what to do with them. Um, and, I felt it build up. I felt it build up. You add that with the lack of sleep, or if your child has behavioral issues or any kind of delay that you're dealing with. Um, it's just so much emotion. Um, I can't even describe it to you. So I ended up guilting myself and making myself feel horrible. Um, my second child, he was born 7 years later. We didn't plan it that way. We had planned it, to have kids kind of closer together. Just didn't work out that way. So I waited for John Weldon. Well, all of us did, but like I really felt like I had a hole in my heart that wasn't filled, until he came along 7 years later. So we all waited 7 years for him, and he was a colicky baby. Colicky just means they don't sleep, they cry all the time. Um, he wasn't eating properly. It wasn't what I was expecting after 7 years. I was expecting it to be easy because I'm like, I've done this once already. Yes, no problem. And I'm still a special education teacher. I'm still working with toddlers and infants all day, every day, and I have my child at home. So it wasn't like that at all. It was like having another first child. I feel like I forgot everything. And so John was colicky and he cried. Oh my God, it seemed 24/7. And he didn't sleep. Um, and he wasn't eating. And so from when he was born, really, he was my medical child. He had the cord wrapped around his neck and stopped breathing during birth, and he just seemed to have one medical problem after the next. So the constant crying, we found out, was from reflux, and he had it so bad that his throat even looked, they call it cobblestoning. I don't know if you remember what like cobblestones were back in the day, just stones that made, like say a driveway, a walkway. Well, that's what his throat looked like because it had been burned so much from the acid. So that's why he was crying all the time. So we got that under control ish. He still didn't sleep because the second you'd lay him down, it didn't matter if um, he had the meds or not. It just, it just comes up, and we put his bed up. I even let him sleep on his stomach, and I blew a fan into his face so that the air would circulate. And that helped. That really did help. But I didn't want to do that at night. So, because I wasn't with him. Oh God, all night, every night. It's like we were up. And then at 3 months old, he had a small surgery and a procedure, which caused him lifelong lung damage. Unfortunately, something happened. And so he's had reactive airway disease ever since. And he had the cluster ear infections, as did my daughter. So he ended up getting out, or getting tubes. He also, when he breathed, when he was breathing, he sounded like, well, his adenoids were swollen. So he ended up having another surgery and getting the tubes put in and the adenoids taken out. By the time he was 1, he had at least 10 specialists, because I can still name them, but I think I'm forgetting a few. But so it was hard, and I felt horrible again that I felt like it was hard, but and again, I shamed myself. I buried those feelings. I didn't deal with them. I didn't tell anybody, heaven forbid, because everybody who I knew, I had been saying, I waited 7 years, and now it's finally coming true. And I did feel that way, but when John got here, he was just not it no, not he was perfect. He was, oh my God, he's so cute. And he would snuggle and, hug in, and that's how I spent most of my time, and my husband as well. If I didn't have him on me, Mark had him on him. Mark would even Mark would even put him in the baby backpack or the baby thing in the front and vacuum and do chores while I was slowly losing my sanity. And I was lucky to have a co-parent. A lot of my families, and a lot of people just in general, they don't even have that. So they don't have somebody to hand that baby off to. Um, you know, and you're feeling this frustration and this tiredness. It's making you think things that, you wouldn't normally think. And again, I had postpartum depression, but I didn't have, thank God, I didn't have those awful flashes. But I made myself feel terrible about, feeling bad that I finally had this little one who filled that hole in my heart, and I had my full family. But why wasn't I happy? Oh my God, I'm a terrible person, right? Absolutely. I'm a terrible person. And so I didn't talk to anybody about that. Uh, Not even my husband. I didn't tell him. I told him that I had the postpartum again, and, that the doctor gave me a treatment. Um, and that helped with that, but it didn't help with my actual, like, how I was feeling about my emotions. Like, how I felt about being depressed, how I felt about being frustrated with John because he just cried and cried and, you know, feeling so sad because he had so many medical issues. Um, so fast forward a little bit, not much, but at 9 months is when it really uh, I don't even know what the phrase is, but we had some major trauma in our lives. We lost my mother-in-law 1 week, who was my daughter's best friend, and she was 7 at the time. Um, and that was awful. And that happened 1 week. We buried her on Friday, and the following Wednesday, I remember it. I was sitting at a family's house in Holland, um, and I got a phone call from the daycare, and they said, John has this big bump on the side of his head, like right here. So I immediately left Holland. It took me 45 minutes to get up to him, to his daycare. And when I saw him, I walked in and I saw this. It was this big bump, and I'm like, what the heck is that? But he was eating. When he saw me, he smiled and he kicked his little feet. Like, I remember it as clear as day. And so I went over to him and I touched this bump, and it was squishy, and I'm like, okay, this is really weird. What is going on? But I wasn't like super worried, only because, like I said, he was alert. He noticed me. He was eating what I had packed for him that day. He never slept, so that was never a thing. Um, and I thought, what the heck? I thought, well, maybe it's a cyst. I didn't know, I'm not a doctor. Can cysts come on that easily? So I called my doctor, and he said, "Oh, he's eating, he's smiling, he's playing, he's all right. Bring him in after work." So I went back to work, and I left him there. And so I went back to work, and when I got home, or when I got done, I picked up my daughter, and she and I took him to the doctor. And the doctor's like, this is weird. You're right. I don't know what this is. He said, but I'm not really worried because, just like we said, he's smiling, he's eating, and he acted totally normally. So he said, you know what? I am going to send you for a CAT scan. And I said, okay. And we went for the CAT scan, which was torture. My daughter and I couldn't go in because of the amount of radiation. So they had to strap my 9-month-old to a table. And we could hear him screaming. Oh my God. It was just like 25 minutes to a half an hour of just him screaming. And I was crying, and Madison at 7 years old was trying to comfort me, and she had just lost her grandma. And then they took us into a room, and I still get choked up at this. Uh, she said, I don't know how to tell you this, but your son has a fractured skull and a brain injury. And she put me on the phone with the doctor, and I just went numb. Like, I didn't cry. I didn't do anything. I didn't have any emotion whatsoever. I was just in crisis mode. And so they put me on the phone with my doctor. And the first thing I said to him is, what do I do? Um, and he said, you take him right down to Children's Hospital. And I said, okay. And I didn't have any emotion, not at all. And so my daughter and I took him, and in the car, because what had happened the week before, Madison, said to me, is John going to die? And I thought quickly to myself, like, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to die. But I couldn't let myself think like that yet, because I was trying to drive and get to the hospital. And so I told her, no, he's going to be fine. But I didn't know that. So long story short, yep, he did. He had a fractured skull and a brain bleed. What had happened was John was an early walker. I'm not lying, he walked at 7.5 months. And the special education teacher in me said, like thought about it. I'm like, I don't know if this is good because he didn't have the cognitive skill to know about danger or really pain. What pain had he really experienced from like hurting himself? I mean, he had experienced pain during his surgeries and procedures, but nothing, you know, nothing like that. So I was worried. And what happened was when he was at the daycare, they have those little small bookshelves with the toys on them, and they're so cute. Well, they have corners, very pointy corners. Well, John had been walking for quite a while, for over a month, but he still wasn't completely stable. So, come to find out from the daycare that he had fallen on one of those corners right here, and it had pierced right through his skull, and it pierced his brain. It didn't pierce the skin, though. That was the weirdest part. His skin stayed totally intact. What that squishiness was cerebral fluid. So the fluid that's around your brain, which actually was good. That there was a hole, because when the brain gets an injury, most times it swells. And I have known many little ones who have had to have the top of their scalp taken off to let the brain swell. Well, since he had this hole, it was draining the water, and the water was able, fluid, water, whatever you want to call it, it was able to go into the space in between his skin and his skull. Eventually, that all, absorbed back in. So, yeah, that's what happened to him. And, wow. Yeah, it's hard to even talk about. And then, in the hospital, so now we just had grandma pass away. John fractured his skull. And for some reason, now I love CPS. I think they're wonderful. I've worked with them on a lot of cases. Um, they have too many cases and not enough social workers. Well, for some reason, they decided that they didn't want to believe that his injury was at daycare. So we'd gone through all that all day. We're finally settled in our room. I had gotten John to sleep, which was unusual for him anyway. But I'd gotten him to sleep. And all of a sudden, this person just comes in and is turning on lights. And I'm like, what is happening? She was from Child Protection. And she basically told me that she felt that this had happened with me and my husband. And where was my daughter, because they needed to interview her. And she was with a friend of mine, and it was midnight, and she'd lost her grandma the week before, and they said, well, we're waking her up. And I even explained to them, I'm like, please, can you please just wait till the morning, because she's already traumatized. She'd asked me, is he gonna die? But they wouldn't. I don't know what to say about that. I know they were doing their job, but it still just was one more level of trauma. So they woke her up in the middle of the night, because I didn't know this, but they don't want you to be able to talk to your child. So then they're asking her questions about, do mom and dad hurt you? Do they hurt the baby? What happened to the baby? Do you know what happened to the baby? Did you see it? So then she was traumatized yet again. And it was it was rough. It was really rough. And they treated me like a child abuser at the hospital. They wouldn't tell me anything. I didn't even know what kind of injury he had until I had a friend of mine who is a doctor look at the CD and tell me what it showed. They wouldn't tell me anything. So why am I telling you all this? There were a lot of emotions to deal with there. There was, my son is hurt. Um, what is his future going to be like? It wasn't a traumatic brain injury, but it was still a brain injury. You know, I don't know what it's going to look like. And now I'm labeled an abuser. Thank God for Children's Hospital. They intervened on our behalf because they wouldn't allow me to take John home. Um, and our social worker from Children's Hospital got it so that we could take him home after 3 days. And then we had the visit from Child Protection. So Madison was interviewed again, and we were not allowed to be with her. And they come through, and I knew what they look for because I work with Child Protection and early intervention. They checked our foods, our cupboards for food. They checked to make sure each child had a bed and a dresser. I don't know why they checked for a dresser. I don't understand what the big deal is about a dresser, but they did. They both had dressers. Um, and and then they talk to you and what happened, and they want to hear your story again. And they didn't close our case for 6 months. The daycare said it happened there, and they didn't close our case for 6 months. So I called Albany every single week, and I said, is this case closed yet? And she said, you're the only one who calls us every week. And I'm like, well, he wasn't with me, so so finally, after 6 months, it was closed. It's still there, by the way. It's not like they don't wipe it off. So we were finally home. We finally didn't have Child Protection, looming over us, but there was a lot to deal with, just the emotions of it all. And it happened right before Christmas, John's first Christmas. So, like, even the fun things that we would be doing that season were just sad. Like, even picking out a tree that year, Maddie and I went and we were just like, let's just get that one. And, you know, we were all sad, and we were all traumatized, all three of us. So what did I do with that emotion? I took that emotion, just like I had with everything else, and I just stuffed it down and stuffed it and stuffed it and stuffed it. Because I thought to myself, I got to be strong here. I got things to do. I got things to deal with. It was the worst thing possible that I could have done. And it's funny because I had this exact conversation, years before with one of my best friends. I've known him for 26 years, Rob. He and his wife, Stephanie, their first daughter, Ari, was diagnosed with a very rare syndrome called Angelman syndrome. And he and I were talking about emotions, and he said the same thing. He said, I gotta be strong. I gotta be strong for Steph, and I gotta be strong for Ari. And I said, and this is what I said to him, just what I had learned from parents and what I had told parents. And I'd only had a little bit of this with Madison, because by 4, Madison, well, she only got OT to begin with. And then by 4, she was discharged. And so I said to Rob, I go, now I had been pushing down my emotions for how many years? I can't remember. Ari was, I want to say, like 2 maybe when she got diagnosed, which meant that Madison was 4. So I'd already been pushing that down, that how I felt. But I gave him the advice that I give to every single family. I said, you have to feel your feelings. I said, this is a grieving process. I said, it's the grieving process of what you thought was going to be. It doesn't mean it can't be wonderful, but you have to feel those emotions and go through it. And I told him that. I told him that knowing that I didn't do it. And then with John, there were so many more emotions, and I buried them, buried them, buried them. And the whole time I'm telling parents whose children are being diagnosed with autism, with cerebral palsy. I had infants on my caseload who had just come home from the hospital because they had Down syndrome. I immediately was on the case. I was telling them all that. I was telling them, you need to deal with your emotions. It's a grieving process. It's, grieving what you thought was going to be, because it's not that way. So after John, I still kept saying it, but I didn't do it. Why didn't I do it? Because it hurt. It hurt. The thing that hurt the most. All right, I'm going to get a tissue. Hold on. I have tissues in every room because of COVID-19, and we even have our own boxes of tissues that have our names on them just in case. But this is, I get choked up. I left him with a brain bleed and a skull fracture at daycare. I left him there. I saw him and I left him. That's the most painful part for me. I know, I talked to his doctor, and his doctor said he's fine, no one expected that because of the way that he was. Like, he should not have been okay. He should have gone unconscious. Something should have happened, but I honestly believe that my in-laws, Grandma Carol and Grandpa Weldon, were there. I believe that they cushioned the blow somehow. But yeah, he should not have been okay. So that was hard, and to know that I left him was the worst part. And I still, as you can see, I've dealt with it, and it still bothers me to this day that I didn't just suddenly rush him to the emergency room. Would I have had a different outcome? No, probably not, because he hadn't gone unconscious, and he never did. He never had a seizure, like they thought he might. Everything was fine. He was just this kid with a giant bump on his head. So I buried it. While all the time, while I was telling my parents that your emotions matter and you need to deal with them so that you can come out on the other side where everything can be beautiful. It's just in a different way. So I engaged in some negative behaviors. I overate, and I was compulsively shopping. And one day, my husband, he figured it out, and he came to me and he said, I need to talk to you. And I was like, oh, I think John was like a year and a half old, and he said to me, something is wrong with you. You are engaging in these behaviors, and what is happening with you? And I was caught. I just started weeping, and I told him what was wrong, and he was wonderful because he didn't have to be wonderful about that because I was engaging in destructive behaviors. He could have been very lectury. He could have been angry with me, but he wasn't. He was loving, and that's what still gets me, is that he was so loving, and that was the road to dealing with, or the start, I should say, of the road back and dealing with my emotions. I was literally in a hole, and that's how I felt. I mean, like, I was in this deep, dark hole because since Madison was born, so Madison was like 8.5 or 9 at this point, I had been burying all that emotion. because it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. It wasn't that beautiful thing that we see in movies and on TV where you're glowing and you're holding your baby and, you're walking around in the neighborhood with your carriage and saying hi to everybody and everybody's looking at your baby. It wasn't like that. Um, it didn't mean though that it wasn't beautiful. Madison was, oh my God, raising her was just, it was amazing. And raising John has been amazing too. Um, and it is beautiful. It's just beautiful in a different way. Um, so I had to crawl out of that hole. I needed a ladder, and it was step by step by step. And like I said earlier, I'm lucky I have a partner in crime, my husband, to help me along with it. But, a lot of you and a lot of other people, they don't have that other person to recognize, like, you're struggling, you're underwater, you need help. So I took a very long journey. John was 2 when I started the journey. And the journey continues, as you can see. I still cry when I tell the story. It doesn't mean that I haven't dealt with the emotion. It just means that, it still gets me when I think back to that. Someday I won't ever cry, I hope. Someday when John's, an adult and has a job and, maybe a family and things that he loves in his life, maybe I won't cry anymore. Maybe the story won't affect me anymore. But um, I want you to know it's okay to feel your feelings. It's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to feel exhausted emotionally. It's okay to look at your child and think, oh my God, what did I do? Like when John cried for those 3 months, my mind was so gone. I just felt like I even said it out loud. And I will admit this. I have only said this to a few people ever. I said out loud to my husband, like, do you think the hospital will take him back? Like, that's how gone my mind was at that point. Um, and do I still feel guilty to this day about saying that? Yes. Which I shouldn't, because it was just an emotion. It was my emotion at the time. And when I'd had enough sleep, finally, after he started sleeping, and I was able to take care of myself again, I didn't feel that way. Absolutely not. I couldn't imagine my life without John Weldon. I couldn't imagine this family without John Weldon. Um, so it's still an ongoing process. Behaviorally, too. I want to tell you, sometimes our kids push all of our buttons, um, and we're mad at them. And, you might think in your head, like, my kid is being such a little jerk right now. I even in my thoughts, I don't ever say my child is a jerk. Even in my thoughts, I say is being and I do think those things sometimes. I'm like, why is he or she being such a jerk? But I don't say it to them. Those thoughts I keep in my head. And those thoughts really shouldn't, you shouldn't beat yourself up about them. If you don't say it to your child or act that way to your child and it just stays in your head, it doesn't count. You're allowed to think anything you want to think, but it's what you do with those thoughts that matter. If you act on those thoughts and treat your child in a certain way or call your child a name, that's when it matters. And then you're going to have to do a lot of encouragement and positivity to get your child back to that point where, they trust you emotionally again. So I would say feel all the feelings that you want to feel. Just don't say them out loud to your child. Um, when you're feeling them too, if you can, I understand that there are times that you can't step away because a child is being dangerous in a tantrum or, being destructive because they're in some sort of emotional state. And you can't leave them, you can't let them see it on your face, which I know is so hard. I've spent a long time trying to not let children see it on my face. I've spent 24 years because I'm a behavior specialist trying to not let children see it on their face when they're annoying me. And because they do it on purpose, like they don't want to follow through with something, so they know which buttons push, 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 push. And it takes a lot of work to not let them see it. But that is what I'm going to ask you to try and do. I'm going to ask you to try and walk away. I'm going to ask you to try and push it down only for the moment so you can get through the situation. And then later you can deal with the emotion of my child slapped me in the face. My child bit me. My child called me a nasty name. As you know, I've been through all of that with many children, my own and others. And I've learned to I sit there and I'm like, oh, really? Interesting. But I don't let it show. I deal with my emotions when I'm on my own, usually. Or, like I said, I do have a partner in life, my husband, and we share our emotional stuff together. But I really don't share that with many other people. I share it with you parents because I want you to know you're not alone. You're not alone to think, my child's acting like a little jerk today. You're not alone in that. You're not alone in, oh my God, I'm so angry. If he asks me that one more time, I'm just going to explode. You're not alone in that. You're not alone in, this is not what I thought it was going to be. You have people who feel the exact same way. So I want you to be doing things to take care of yourselves too. I meditate every single day. I mainly took it up because I'm very sound sensitive. And I work with toddlers, so those two don't really go together. So when in the evening time, I had to like literally like shut off the noise and just let my ears reset. So how I do it is I'm in darkness with no sound. That's the way that I do it, and I'm sitting somewhere comfortable where nobody can um, get to me. I even lock the door. Shh, don't tell. Just so that I can be by myself and think. You don't have to meditate in the typical way. You don't have to meditate. Just allow yourself maybe 5-10 minutes a day to like go through your emotions and how are you feeling today? Are you frustrated? You might be frustrated today, but you might feel great tomorrow. So what is the moral of this totally way too long video? A, you're not alone. I am here with you. Not only am I a therapist, I am a parent who has gone through everything. Well, not everything, but similarly that you've gone through. Your child may have different problems or difficulties than my children had or are still having. So I want you to know that even though we're not going through the exact same thing, I know how you feel, and reach out. If you need me, reach out. If you're feeling like you have nobody to talk to, reach out. You don't have to reach out to me. You can reach out to anybody and just let them know how you're feeling. Make sure it's a trusted person that won't judge your emotion. Remember, I always say, I'm not here to judge. I'm here to help. So make sure it's someone that you know won't judge you and will help you. And yeah, you're not alone. So I'm a parent too, and I've gone through a lot of that. So yeah, that's what I want you to know. When I say I'm your biggest cheerleader, I am your biggest cheerleader. We are a team. I will help you through this every step of the way because I don't want you to end up in that big hole that I was in with the ladder. So work through your emotions, okay? Don't be ashamed of them. Don't be embarrassed. Don't think, oh my God, I shouldn't be thinking that. Why not? Why can't you think whatever you want to think? Like I said, just don't let your child know that you're thinking it, because then they know how to push your buttons even more. But have I lost it with my children? Oh my God, absolutely. 100 times. I apologize to them now when I do lose it. Have I lost it? I think twice during this whole pandemic thing. And I apologized to them and I said, I'm sorry. This is stressful. Um, so when your child is having behaviors or there's a stressful situation with your child, or just a stressful situation in general, feel your feelings. They're okay. You're okay. And you're going to be better if you feel them than if you bury them down like I did. Um, if my husband hadn't sat me down, would I still be burying them? Probably. I probably would. But I was very lucky that he came to me and he knew something was going wrong, very wrong. Um, so reach out. Don't feel embarrassed. Don't feel ashamed. These are your emotions and your feelings. And I always tell you that the toddlers are entitled to their feelings and emotions. So guess what? You're entitled to yours too. It's just that we're adults and we actually have better coping skills than our toddlers. So pick what works for you. Exercise, that's a big one that can really help. Like I said, walking away. You don't have to meditate. You can walk away and just kind of zone out for a little bit, watch a show that you enjoy, make a phone call, talk to somebody, whatever is your process, just so that you can move on and move forward and become positive. So those are my words of encouragement and advice, and those are my words to tell you that I understand you on a level that, as a parent, I get it. I totally get it. I've been there. Um, and I still have to deal with my emotions every day. Because some days, things pop up. And so please make yourself important too and deal with the emotions that you have. All right? Reach out to me if you need me. You can text me. You can leave me messages now. I've had a couple people leave me messages right on YouTube. But let me know if you're feeling a certain way, and I might be able to help you, or reach out to somebody else and they might be able to help you. But just make sure you're dealing with that, okay? And remember, it might not be what you expected it to be, but it can still be beautiful. My life is beautiful. My children are beautiful. They're wonderful. I love them. I wouldn't change them or trade them for anything or anyone. And my experiences have made me stronger. And my experiences have made me understand my families 100 times, a million times better. So if you need me, reach out. You know where I am. Okay, this is Kim signing off. I am here for all of you. Peace out.